me the most. What are you watching? Like, what's something that's caught your attention recently? Like, what album are you listening to? What are you watching? Like, what's interesting lately?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd say just from like a mindless watching stuff, I've been watching quite a lot of White Lotus. I just like screamed through it. It was amazing. And why did I love it? I think it's
How
one of
good
those
is
where it's
how
like
good is
it's a
that title
thriller.
sequence?
Yeah, that title sequence is beautiful for
It's
sure.
hypnotizing.
And each series, I love how each season also adapts to the idea of what it's about. Like the first season, I think, is all about money, and then the second season is all about sex, and the title sequence reflects that. But I love that series because it's kind of like it's like a mixed genre. Whereas it's a thriller, you're on the edge of your seat, but you're laughing. It's like not like a kind of a classic horror thriller. So I've been watching that. I think that's pretty cool. I've been playing a lot with AI actually, like everyone has. This chat GPT is blowing my mind. I think it's blowing everyone's mind. But I've been playing with that a lot, like just seeing how I can introduce it in my job. The other day I got it to write my daughter's birthday party invitation in the voice of Elsa, which was pretty hilarious. And then I'm always playing music. I play guitar and I mess around and write music, and so kind of I'm always keeping my mind busy with sort of a creative outlets. I'm watching stuff always and reading a lot of stuff about new tech and certain books that I'm reading as well. I just finished The Devil in the White City, which is a story about Chicago, and it's a pretty cool book. But in terms of like the tech, I'm getting pretty deep in this AI. I started with Midjourney, and then I got into DALL-E too.
Midjourney's crazy. Like, so Alex, FaZe, Alex from our team, he's like the first one to hit us up. And so like all weekend I set up like the account, and I'm just going to give you like a few of the things. Like I was just like, where can I take this thing? So I started coming up with random things. So I put Darth Vader partying in a Miami nightclub, Jason Bourne partying in a Miami nightclub, popping bottles. And dude, it was spitting out these things to me, and I was speechless. This morning, the show. Yeah, this morning I was like telling the team, I was like, show me Ghostbusters fighting a ghost in downtown Miami. And it did it. And I couldn't believe it. It's crazy.
Incredible. It's changing our lives. But you know what? I think it's a great tool for like the first kind of stepping stone. Like just to get the brain moving to like, to think about ideas. I don't think the ideas are that amazing. Besides the kind of the renders and stuff, that's unbelievable. But when it comes to like conceptual thinking, it's more, I think it's like specifically chat GPT.
Yeah. Tell me a little, give me just like, I guess I don't understand it. So
essentially, it's a text-based AI. So essentially what you do is you can ask it to write things for you, like whatever you want, or ideas or questions, and it can spit back, and you can give it parameters like you do with images. You can say, I want you to reply in a funny tone. I want you to respond in the voice of Michael Scott from The Office. Like you can give it specific requests, and it will then kind of write very, very kind of scientific, very factual answer that you ask for. So for instance, to give you the example of my daughter's birthday party invitation, I said, my daughter is having a birthday party at this venue between this time. It's a Princess Tea birthday party. I want you to write it in the voice of Elsa. She's coming dressed as Little Mermaid, and it'll be in Miami. It'll be hot, so it'll be a warm tea party. It basically spat me back, dear blah, blah, blah. We are welcome you to Her Royal Highness's birthday party in the tropical, and so like it writes the full invitation.
Wow.
Like as another example, we had a client that we were pitching on, and I said, hey, can you write me taglines on this client about, let's say, about the subject? And it spat me out a bunch of taglines. Like and they were really bad. I mean, they were terrible.
Yeah.
But like they gave me some thoughts to like where I can take it.
No, it's like having a bounce board. Like I was telling Ramiro, I'm like, the way I see it is, it still requires a great art director or creative director to ask the right question, and what it's just giving you is stuff, but you still have to be able to ask the right question. You still need to understand where you're like kind of going,
Totally. It's all about the questions you ask, and those kind of give you the type of response that you're looking for, and then you can tweak the question as well. If the first response isn't exactly what you wanted, you tweak it slightly and see what it comes back with. And then the other day, at the beginning of this week, something else even blew my mind even further. There's now this AI which can make full-on decks for you, like creative decks. You tell it what the brief is. It's called Another Agency or something like that. You tell it what the brief is. You tell it what the target audience is. You tell it what the client is, and then it kind of spits you out legitimately like boards, like idea write-ups on the side, images on the right hand side. It's like a full presentation, which was pretty insane. So yeah, no, awesome. The AI thing is pretty fun. And so like, I've been messing around with that quite a bit. And yeah, I just, like I said, I've got kids as well. For me, that's like the greatest piece of creativity, because when you're with them, you kind of have to be present in the moment. You have to kind of, I guess, get on their level. When you get on a kid's level, that's just pure creativity, right? Mm-hmm. Even drawing, playing with them, pretend, imagination, like it's to me, that's the most amazing practice of creativity. Like I love to tell my kids stories every night that we make up. And they'll throw out themes. Or like, I don't know, last night was like tigers and T-Rexes, and they'll throw out a theme and then we'll freestyle a story together. Like I love that kind of stuff. That's amazing for me.
So my boys are 9 now, and I say that the peak of life has to be an 8-year-old kid. Like I really believe it's like ripe, and I always say this to people. I'm like, it's ripe. You believe absolutely anything is possible, and it's before like the sexual stuff grabs you. So it's like you're innocent. You're like in that space where you're not interested in somebody sexually yet, and yet you're at that point where you have enough of an imagination that you think anything's possible. And I don't know what it is about like that unpolluted state where you're not. It's just you're existing with your full creativity, and it's like really crazy, man.
It's amazing, yeah. And a lot of the time, I think, as grown up people, we find it hard to match that, right? Our kids just want us to match them, to be on their level, and it takes a lot of energy to do that, for sure. Yeah. Especially being in a creative industry, to be able to match that. So for me, it's a constant struggle and challenge, and I love it. But it is a constant challenge to be like, how do I match that level of playfulness, curiosity, creativity? And it's amazing when you don't have stuff going through your mind, and you're just focused and in the moment and present with them. Like there's nothing more fun, more creative than being with kids. So
for sure,
that to me is like how I keep my mind busy and active as much as possible.
Yeah, so one of the things that I realized is like a great life hack is, there's a lot of things that we grew up with that are like old things or whatever. Like I bought those little balsa planes that have the propeller with the rubber band on Amazon for like $10. I bought like 3 of them, and I went outside and these kids were like blown away by it. And I'm like, if you think about stuff like slot car racing, like the little electric cars that go on the thing, get those things for like nothing. And there's so many things that we had as kids or we played with that to them is like mind blowing, and you could just get it for like cheap on Amazon, and it's like amazing because for them I've been going on a thing now. It's my opinion. Lego is like the Apple of toys. Like what they've done is incredible. Like they're like, we have an entire generation that will buy you create Ecto 1. Oh, let's make one 4 times the size, charge 4 times the price, and it's this big now. And I'm building the Ghostbusters car with my kids, and it's like the most amazing thing in the world.
It's life size. It's a life size car. My best thing with Lego that we do is like we're also huge at Lego Avengers, Ninjago. Freaking, I don't know, every single type of Lego you can think of. We probably have Star Wars we collect. Awesome. But what happens is that we end up making things and we get deep into it once we made it. We play with it a little bit. And then kind of as it would happen is because we have so much of it, like it goes into the one, we got the big crates that you put them in.
Yeah.
They'll break. And so then what we'll do is we'll kind of either make our own shit afterwards or keep remaking it, rebuilding and finding it and finding the pieces, or like turning the car into like a weird ship. And that's my best when, like in the beginning, my boy who's 6, he kind of gets very into it. He's the one that gets very specific and pedantic. Oh, it has to be exactly the same. The moment like it's worn out, it gets kind of into the box, it breaks. The most fun we have is when we're rebuilding it and like trying to come up with new stuff to build it into. Awesome. I love that part of it.
No, it's amazing.
The Lego drawing, Play-Doh. The other thing is clay. We've got this other new stuff we just found. It's not Play-Doh. It's like almost this colorful clay so it doesn't dry out, but you can make cool shit out of it. And so we're playing with that quite a bit as well.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me into, I guess let's talk about your childhood, like a little bit of your upbringing, your family.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, tell me a little bit where you born, where you grew up, a little bit of your background.
I'm from South Africa originally. I was born in Johannesburg, which is Johannesburg's like more of the city. I would say like probably like the New York of South Africa. And then when I was about 10, my parents kind of uprooted and moved to Cape Town, which is more of the coastal city. My parents are almost kind of different background, different sort of, my parents were different sort of backgrounds. My dad was more of the sales guy, always selling shit, selling hard, had multiple different types of sales jobs his whole life. And my mom was the creative one. She was in advertising. Before I was born, she was advertising. And then when I was born, she kind of was always doing creative stuff. She was doing murals for people, for businesses, doing their kind of outside murals. She was an interior decorator. She made toys. So she was always the creative one. And so I always had like this dream of going into advertising as a kid because of my mom. Like I used to make one of the earliest memories I had was like making cards, birthday cards was a huge thing for me. Like I used to go so deep into like the art direction of it, like finding magazines, cutting shit out and like almost constructing a little ad, which I would make for my parents and my brother. And so like I have early memories of like, oh, this advertising thing, it's kind of cool. And then basically at the age of, we had like a work shadow opportunity. I think at the age of 15, my mom connected me with one of her old advertising friends. And I still remember this to this day. The guy took me, I had to meet him at I think it was 8 a.m. or 8:30 in the morning outside in front of reception. Here I am, young kid, super amped about advertising. It sounds creative, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. My mom, who was just like, who was kind of a stalwart in the industry. She won a bronze Clio from South Africa, which is amazing. Awesome. And I arrived there and the guy comes out and he goes, "Hey, Dean, nice to meet you. Can you wait here on the couch? I'll be with you in an hour." And so basically the guy came in an hour. He said, "Oh, I'm still busy." That's the last time I saw him. It made me wait on the couch the whole day till 5 p.m. Obviously devastated, a young kid wanting to work shadow, excited. He said, "Oh, come back tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll have time for you. Come back." He did the same thing to me 2 days in a row, made me wait on the couch. And it kind of tainted me a little bit. I said after that, I was like, fuck this shit. If this is this what people are like in advertising, where they tell you to come to their business and then they just basically ghost you and treat you like shit. And I was like, no, actually, fuck this. I don't want to be in advertising. This is not, I'll never work. I remember, from like making almost a 360, from being like the guy, a young kid who's like, yeah, that's what I want to do when I grow up, legitimately, to then like, I never want to work in this industry again. This is it. I'm done. And then basically what happened at the age of 18, in South Africa, when unlike America, between university, not everyone does it, but a big thing is called a gap year, where you take a year off to go overseas or work or like do your thing, or you basically take that year to find yourself. And so straight after school at the age of 18, I had some kind of family issues. I was like, I'm done. I want to go overseas. I want to go live somewhere else besides South Africa. And so I packed up and I moved to the UK. I got a job basically doing door-to-door sales in a little town in Southampton, knocking on people's doors. And I was very good at it. I was unbelievable at it. That I made a lot of money for it. I said like an 18, 19-year-old in England making like £1,000 a week, just getting trashed every week. I brought my parents over to come visit me. Like it was that kind of money where I was like bringing my folks over. And then, that kind of happened and I went back to South Africa. And then I went, after that year, I made enough money, I saved up. And then I went back, but this time I went back to Scotland doing the same thing, knocking on people's doors, selling gas, electricity, the stories. I mean, it was super character building, like, being there, having no one, just making money for myself, even though I was like this kind of delinquent, partying, getting drunk, but I was working. I was getting up at 7 a.m., working until 5, 6 p.m., knocking on people's door, cold calling, trying to make sales. And then the same thing I did in Scotland for a year. year and a half. And then I kind of got a bit fed up of that, doing the door-to-door sales, the grind of it.
What do you think though? Do you think that in a way, like, that had to have subconsciously assisted and then the transition coming
100%. After? Oh, no. I can talk about that 1,000%, because at the end of the day, this is where we are in the business of creativity, but we're in the business of selling as well. Creativity is nothing without selling. You can tell a client in a brand person, a marketer, the most amazing idea, but if you present it in the wrong way or you sell it the wrong way, they're never going to buy it. So it was huge for me in terms of like growing and coming in the industry and being able to not only sell myself, but sell my ideas. So that was incredibly beneficial. And basically, so to cut a long story short is after 2.5 years, I was like, shit, I should probably study something. And I kind of just fell back into it. I was like, okay, I can get into this ad university. I'll do that, and I'll just go ahead and do it. And then, it's kind of the rest is almost history, because I basically studied there, got a job straight after during the recession, got a job straight after when everyone was getting fired. I got a job as an intern immediately after ad school. It was just this really big, great agency in Cape Town. It's called Ogilvy Cape Town. I was there for 7 years, and then basically, won a bunch of awards there. In my first 2 years, I won a Gold Lion, and I was winning Bronze Lion. I was super successful in my kind of early career. And that kind of gave me the confidence then, because I won a Gold Lion the 1 year, they sent me to Cannes, and then I met some people there, the experience of being in the Cannes Advertising Festival, just seeing how big the industry was and how global it was. It almost propelled me to be like, yeah, let me try and see if I can get a job overseas. And so I met some people when I was there in Cannes, and we had some chats, and next, 2 years later, I got a job to come move to Chicago.
Nice.
At FCB, and that's kind of how the rest is history in America. But that's, that kind of those early years with Africa, getting a job and being surrounded. I think the big thing at the agency I was surrounded by so many incredibly talented people who have all gone on now to work at agencies across the world, London, Paris, America, all super highly. I think majority of the people, the creatives in that specific agency, have now gone on to be world famous creatives. They've all, they're all jealous of their work. So being surrounded by that, and then kind of doing well myself, then having the opportunity is I felt the confidence too. Wherever I went, whether it was America or England or whatever, I felt like I could do the job, right? Because I'd seen people who were incredible at their job. I'd done amazing work. And I think I just came to the realization that wherever you are, as long as you can bring yourself to the job.
It's funny. I was just gonna say, like, one of my questions for you is, and you kind of answered it with the door-to-door sales kind of gig. I would imagine that at first I was gonna be like, what was that jump like coming over here and being so isolated? But in many respects, not only were you were like kind of living on your own or doing your own thing at a young age, but also you were like, I mean, you shed the failure thing quick. Clearly, like when you're doing this door-to-door sales, I mean, that thing just melts off of you. After that, it's like anything that people are scared of, that's like a thing you're not even factoring in anymore.
I think the two things I learned from that job that have been kind of pivotal. One is you can talk to anyone. Like literally, you can talk to anyone. I would like speak to guys who were like my age, people that were like in their 70s, like MILFs that were trying to hit on me to kind of get me to go sleep with them, like to like old grannies who were like had their grandsons down. Like I could literally speak to people with different kind of economic backgrounds. Some people who are like living in the like with garbage bags surrounding them. Other people who lived in mansions. Like I felt no fear of who I could speak to. So like speaking to a client for me has never been something I've been afraid of. And then the second thing was just presenting, like being able to present, put forward my idea in a clear, articulate way. That's something that you learn after knocking on thousands of doors. And if you know something well enough, like we do in this business with ideas and presentations, it becomes second nature. And so I think almost that background of kind of being able to talk to anyone and then being able to present anything almost kind of lent itself almost seamlessly into kind of my job in advertising. I remember kind of my first, after, I think it was like my third year being in the industry, I had my boss at the time wasn't around, or he was sick, or I think he was on vacation. And we had a presentation. I was, it was, like I said, my third year of being in the industry. And we had a presentation to like a board. It was like this huge board. I think it was like 10, 12 people of all senior executives. And it was just me represent. I had to present. I remember being in that moment and everyone was like, "Are you okay? Okay." And I was just like, nothing. Just presented it. I killed it. I crushed it. It was an amazing presentation. We sold the idea. And from then, even like, I just knew this to me, the presenting part will never be an issue for me. Nice. And so that was amazing. And then the other thing is I met my wife in first year of university, and we worked together as a team as well in our first year, in our first job. And so having that support system as well in advertising is huge. She kind of gave up her job to kind of so that I could pursue my career in America. So having her has been everything for me. So I think without her, I probably would be way more overweight than I am now. One, and two, I probably would be like an emotional wreck, because kind of having the support system at home is everything. So
I feel the same. I feel the exact same way about my wife. I mean, she supported me, through this whole journey, and then it's like a psychotic journey to be an entrepreneur or even a business owner, and then on top of it, a creative. It's emotional roller coaster. So I agree with you. Like, it's funny when you said emotional wreck. I'm like, yeah, that sounds very close to home.
Exactly. So then my journey in America started, and it started off pretty well. I was, we came in pretty hot. My partner at the moment now, Bruno, is a Brazilian, so we almost were kind of an arranged marriage, if you will. He came from Brazil, I came from South Africa, and then the funny thing is he never spoke any English. So we started by. So I would take all the presentations, which was fine, and he kind of was an amazing author. He still is. But we would brainstorm with a computer in between us and Google Translate. So I'd be like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Google Translate, and then he kind of go, "Oh, that's cool," and then he would try and translate it back to me, which was amazing. But and then kind of at FCB Chicago is where I was.
But you guys have actually a great dynamics. It's something like I observed, like when we were working here on the Lyft stuff, I remember, like Bruno was a little more like was very like knows exactly, or whether he knows it yet or not, like kind of knows what he wants somewhat right away. But you're more explorative. But I could see how that dynamic, watching you guys work together, how it works. It was very different ways of approaching something, but the mutual respect allowed it to sort of flourish. And I mean, for me, I just love watching creatives do their thing. It's one of my favorite things, just be in the room and watch, be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. I think with any team, you need like sort of yin and yangs. I always find teams that are where you have two people exactly the same. There's always a lot of like friction. Not to say there's not friction with normal teams anyways. I think healthy conflict is super important. But we know kind of our lanes, which we kind of stick to, which is helpful. Awesome. But and then so, I mean, I'm just blathering on you. So please interject with me.
This is great.
If there's anything you want to specifically find out, but
tell me a little bit. Let's just start with this. I mean, I guess it kind of falls within that journey. Like, talk to me about one of those projects, those early projects that you kind of go through your career, and then you go through a few years and you work on things or whatever that you're proud of. But like, do you remember a specific project that like really, man, just the day you're on your deathbed, you'll be like, man, that was an awesome one. That was a really special one, even early on.
I mean,
or anything.
There's so many, but I think I'll name two cases, the two that really stick to my mind the most. I think the one is more of a frivolous, fun one, but the way it happened was just like one of those where just those kind of happenstances. But the first thing I'll talk about, it was my first. I think it was my first month on the job, and there was a brief that came down, which was we used to have this chewing gum brand called Stimroll, which is kind of similar, to Trident gum. It's the same sort of company but different. And they had this problem where they had this gum called Orange. I think it It was orange flavored gum, but they couldn't sell it. So they had 40,000 samples of this gum that no one wanted to buy, but they just wanted to give away. So they had nothing to do with it. And this was still the early days of Facebook, and like Facebook it just wasn't really huge. And so just in the hallways, I heard that this brief was around. It wasn't even my brief. It was like an open brief, but some team had it. And so I just had this, like off the cuff, I had this idea, which was, why don't we get, instead of just selling this gum, why don't we get like the perfect people to give it away? And who would be the perfect people to give it away for orange gum, which was gingers. And so we basically found thousands of ginger-haired people to hand out gum at a music festival. It was like one of these flash mob things. But the thing that was interesting for it, that really opened my mind to the online world, is wasn't the idea itself, is the way we recruited for this idea. Is we basically created a community of gingers on Facebook. It was like one of the first ginger communities of its kind, which was a community of like where gingers, there was always these funny videos going around on South Park. I don't know if you remember back in the day, there was that viral video of that kid. She's like, I got a soul. I'm a ginger and I have a soul. And then South Park ripped him off and then they put him on. It was like a back and forth. And we basically created this Facebook community where we recruited these gingers. Still a group that's around now. I mean, I'm not on Facebook, but I know we handed it over to some ginger person. And the community itself was amazing. It was like these gingers coming together. And then when we did the stunt, it was hilarious because it was at a music festival. And there was these thousands of gingers just like all of a sudden coming out from the stage. It was an amazing sight to behold. But that was like the first time where I was like, shit, you can have ideas like that and people can build on them. You can build a community. You can do something that's beyond just an idea that for a brand. It's an idea that actually has a purpose, it's an idea that makes someone feel like they belong. Right. And that was amazing. It was like awesome. The community almost took on a life of its own. And so that was the first idea, which was like, wow, this job's actually pretty fun in a way that it's not only about selling things. It's also about creating communities and like going beyond just an ad. And so that was the first thing which I was like, fuck, this is a pretty cool industry that we get to do shit like this, where we get to try and recruit a bunch of random gingers that live in a city to kind of be part of a brand thing. And they actually don't only love it, they want to be part of this community, which was amazing. And then the second idea I'll say, which was like still early days, is we had this idea, and this idea kind of changed and it shaped and molded many times. But we originally had this idea. We found this stat. The thing is, in South Africa, there's a lot of places which are extremely hard to reach, right? So like very rural, like no electricity, a lot of them no running water, super rural. Think about people that live in huts that don't have access to like the normal amenities that most people in this world have. Yeah. And so the one thing we did think, we had Coca-Cola as a client at the time. We did know that wherever these communities are, there are these little shops. There's a Coca-Cola truck that will come. There is a Coca-Cola that will drive through these communities. Yeah. And so that kind of led us to an idea, which is like, what if for one day, instead of the Coca-Cola trucks carrying Cokes, they bring with them the amenities that these people need, like these schools need books, water, resources. And so like we got pretty far on that idea and selling it. Right? It was an amazing idea. It's like changing the Coca-Cola trucks that are normally used for delivering Coke to do some good in these communities that are hard to reach. Nice. And so we tried to sell this to Coke for so long. It was an idea which was like, this is never going to happen. And so it didn't happen for Coca-Cola. And we were super bummed. But then we had a brief land on our table, which was to launch Volkswagen's new pickup truck at the time. You don't get it in America. It's an amazing pickup. It's called an Amarok. And the whole thing about this truck is that it could like literally drive. It was a 3-liter, could drive on super hard to reach places. And so basically what we did is we turned the test drives. You could go to a couple of dealerships that were taking part to start. And instead of just going on a normal test drive, you could decide for that day to go on this thing which we called a social test drive, which is basically you could go and deliver stuff to a community and at the same time test the car out. You could go deliver books, you could go deliver supplies, sewing machines was one of them. We did a bunch of them. And so that experience of going to like film that stuff was unbelievable. Not only did I go and go to these incredibly beautiful places that you'd never see normally, like seeing the effect you could have on these kids, on this community, was unbelievable. And that's kind of that started a lifelong passion for ideas that can actually help build brands, but also make a difference in the world. And it's kind of, you'll see throughout my career, I've always had ideas. I've always pushed for ideas that do some good for the world, some more than others. But I think that to me and that really gave me that passion for like doing advertising that goes beyond just the sell and the preach and the hard selling ideas, which people like fall in love with. Why? Because they're changing the world. Even if it's small, it's like doing their part in changing the world. Absolutely. So that idea was a highly awarded idea as well. But beyond that, it was just a beautiful idea to be a part of.
Like going leads us into kind of like the gun violence history book, is one that kind of follows that path. Tell me a little bit about that project.
Yeah, so we arrived in Chicago, and as you know, Chicago is kind of a city that is it's gun violence is kind of with gangs, but just in general access to gun violence, to guns and kind of gun regulations. It's one of the more kind of, I would say, regulated states, Illinois, but still the fact that other states around it aren't regulated does not help the case, because you have people carrying illegal guns over borders. But anyways, as we arrived, they had done a project already there, which was called The Unforgotten, which is they did this really powerful installation of almost these empty sculptures, which they placed across the city, that were of people that had died, that were wearing the actual clothes of the people that had been killed due to gun violence. And so the agency already was doing some advocacy work for this kind of company, or this NGO, this not-for-profit called Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence. And so I knew Bruno and I knew we wanted to do something with that. We wanted to try and put ideas and creativity into it. And so we actually, before gun violence, we had another idea called the Teddy Gun, which was also pretty well kind of accepted, and it definitely helped create conversation through senators, and the senators were able to use it as a tool, which was basically, there's more regulations for teddy bears than guns. So we literally what if we created a gun that was a teddy gun? It looked like a teddy bear, but it was a gun that could be shot. Wow. So it would have less regulations because it was considered a teddy bear. So we did that project. It was super successful. It gave us a lot of trust with the client. And so we knew after doing that project, we wanted to do something else that could really create conversation. But I think the bigger issue was education, and we knew education was a great starting point. And so originally the idea started with just, what if we created a bulletproof book that you shot that could stop a bullet? And then we thought, that's interesting, but I think there's a deeper layer, like there's an educational layer in it. And so the idea of just shooting a book that's bulletproof turned into, what if we compiled the history of gun violence and made it so thick that it could stop a bullet? And so we kind of, it was a huge undertaking for all of us. There was there was a lot of people involved that really pushed this, that helped. But it was basically a ton of research, working with university researchers, with professors, working with gun violence experts to initially compile the book, right? To compile the information that goes in the books. Also articles, we sourced hundreds and thousands of articles, and then obviously making sure that the writing inside it itself told the true history, or the most pertinent moments in the US history. And then obviously the design of it was a huge part of it as well. A design that didn't take away from the bullet that would go through it, but that still kind of complemented and had that visceral reaction to it. So, and that to us, that was I think the client loved it because it was a book they could take around. We went to senators. I interviewed a senator as well, Dick Durbin, who's the senator of Illinois.
So the idea is that literally the book was balanced accurately, like a book from a literature standpoint, but it literally had the ability to stop a bullet.
It did. We shot every book.
That's crazy. Shot every book.
So we worked with an ex-FBI agent, and he basically shot the books for us and like different types of guns. It's pretty incredible when we got the books back, and you see the bullet, how it pierces, and you go through the pages and you see how each page has kind of been torn, where it stops. We put like a little sticker that said this, I think I don't remember the exact copy, but it was like, this book stopped this bullet, you can too, or something like that, you know.
Wow.
And so like as a piece of just this kind of interactive piece, when you touched it and you felt it and you saw it, it's really powerful. And then as a concept, as a symbol, we could use it. The kind of, and Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence could use it as a piece that they took around to help kind of create advocacy to get senators on their side.
Did you, when you were developing that, was that something that like the stopping of like the book stopping? I'm curious where that, like developing this thing, where did that conceptually land? Was that like the first thing you thought of, or did you start developing something else and then landed on what if the book stops this, or like was that always
the first part? The first part is what if we create a bulletproof book, right, with just the pages, and then the thing we layered on it was the history of American gun violence is the thing that should stop the bullet, because you know our country has created so much history. There's been so much history of gun violence, which is a terrible thing, that it can actually stop a bullet. You know, some countries that would have teeny books wouldn't be able to stop that. So
it always reminds me of the Onion. The Onion always does an amazing job. Like the Onion, gun violence. Like the day after, it's always gun violence continues to happen in a country that is something like in a country that says we don't know, or like that we don't know how to stop it. Like it's always like the Onion's sort of like sarcastic way of saying stuff, but it's always like pointing like with their little tone of humor, but it's like it says a country that says they don't know how to fix it or something like that.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
I know, and it's you know, like coming from as an outsider, because I would consider, even though I've been here for almost 8 years, I still consider myself an outsider. It just blows my mind that that issue is something that the country is so divided on, right? Like that. And you know, unfortunately, it comes down to one simple truth: is that there's money involved, right? Money involved. There's a lot of money for people to lose, to go against. And I'm not against. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against gun personally. I know this is the bigger issue. I'm not against people having guns. I think that's fine. But like, let's just make sure people who have guns are doing it in the same way when you have to get a license for a car. You know, it's like, but a lot of places you don't. Like anyone can just buy a gun. Like you just walk to a place, buy a gun, not do a background check, not know your history. Yeah. And so I think that's the part which I always felt the common sense of it feels like it's been lost in this country. So anyways, that was a project that we felt really, really strongly about, and it was a very powerful project to work on. And so I think now, you know, now that we've come to God, I think what we're trying to do is how do we do more projects like that, but then use the power of these big brands that have all this money that can actually make change, you know, with their voices. When you work for a not-for-profit, you have to be a little bit more crafty. You know, a lot of it's to do with really like getting the message out there in a provocative way. And so how do you do that when you have the power of a huge brand? And that's what's really exciting for me in kind of working at Gotcha, is that we try and do that. And we try and push for that for our bigger clients as well.
Awesome. Yeah. You know, and it's great. Like, you know, sometimes, you know, people will get caught up in this idea that, companies are just doing this to be at the forefront. Companies are just doing this to kind of, you know, be culturally relevant or this. And my thing is just like, who cares? I mean, at the end of the day, if you're getting a message out that people are going to see and you're using their platform for it, then you know what, at the end of the day, you know, I think sometimes with these messages, you can't get so caught up in how you get it from point A to point B. It's just sometimes just getting to point B to make sure that people hear it. At the end of the day, that's where the victory is, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I think intention is important. Like the reason you're doing something is obviously important, but at the end of the day, if it's a good thing you're doing, it's a good thing, right? And if you believe and stand by what you do, it doesn't matter what other people say, right? Because you're always going to have haters in this world. As long as your intention is pure and and kind of the reasoning behind it is clear, to me, there's like that's all that matters, right? You're always going to have haters, and sometimes haters are good because it allows the message to be even louder. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, I mean, you know, I don't want to say like, you know, tell me your process. I think a very vague question, but from a standpoint of, you know, when you're diving into something, is there somewhat of a process or are you, it sounds like when you play with your kids, you know, it's more like you have like an open net where things potentially could come and inspire you from anywhere. That's what it sounds like. You know, I'm always fascinated by how creatives approach an idea in general.
I think there's two ways. I don't know. For me, there's two ways that I look at things. The one is like when you have a brief that's pretty tight and that's pretty boxed in. I think that sometimes the smallest boxes can have the biggest kind of creativities or challenges. And as creators, we love challenges. We love finding loopholes. But I think, you know, being able to like kind of dissect a brief and think about all the different ways you can break the brief and think outside that brief's box is amazing. I think that's a lot of creators think, oh, the brief's too tough. I just think you're not thinking about it in a different way, or you're not breaking the brief or trying to bend the rules slightly. I think that's an exciting way. So that's the one way I like to think of things. And then the second way, which to me is also extremely important, the second kind of is just being free. You know, a lot of these ideas sometimes just come from just complete freedom to think. What's catching your attention? What's something you spot on the online or in culture that you're like, oh, that's something that I'm going to use? Or, you know, and then as long as you constantly have what kind of briefs you're working on or what your client problems are in the back of your mind, that stuff comes. And honestly, it just almost kind of fills you up subconsciously, because I think always subconsciously in the back of my mind, I've always kind of, whenever I've joined an agency, the first thing I've asked is like, what are the clients kind of one-liners, what are the briefs, what are the big problems, and like kind of getting really into what those are. If you have that in the back of your mind, ideas just come free. And to me, it's always the most fun when you're completely free and something comes up that you're super excited about, because it's not from a place of like, it has to be this, the place you want to be this. So to me, that's always kind of been the two ways to think of it. One is you have the box, how do you break the box? And the other is if you know what your client's problems are and challenges are, what's just free thinking that when you're always thinking about it, that just comes to you and boom, you've got the idea. And, you know, then it's about like, I think one part is having the idea, and then the other part is how do you take the idea from being good and just keep building it, keep making it better, keep dissecting it, keep telling people to critique you. I'm a strong believer in like the idea always keeps growing. And like I said, you know, we need to have hard skin, because sometimes people tell you things that you disagree with, but a lot of the time it's actually for the better, to make it better. You guys know when you do your edits and you think the edit's perfect, and then you get the feedback, you're like, oh, why did you give me that? And you tried, you're like, oh, actually he was right. I didn't see it that way. And that's the same with ideas and the craft and the execution of it. They keep growing, keep changing, keep getting better. But I think as creatives, we have to be open to that. And that's the biggest challenge people have, is being open to criticism, to critique, to make things better. And I think, you know, if you work with people that you like and that you love sometimes, you're more open to that, right? You know, it's kind of the intention is pure. They're just wanting to make things better.
Absolutely.
That's kind of that's what I try and say to my creators, is like, I'm not doing this to like be a dick, or I'm trying to help us, right? That's the only reason why you give a piece of critique or feedback, is to make something better.
Yeah, I always say to my team, you know, one thing that's helped me is, you know, I tell people, I'm like, you know, my job is not to always every step of the way, like, you know, massage your emotions if you feel some sort of way. My job is to hold you up to the standards of what you told me you wanted to do while you were here. Like I'm going to hold you up to the standards of what we discussed was the expectation of what you wanted to accomplish here. And everyone wants to do great work. So for me, my mindset is like, just know that my intention is for you to achieve that level. So it's like everything in the middle is just going to be kind of rigid and tough and rough. And, you know, like, because emotionally, it's almost like as somebody that's leading a creative team, you don't have the emotional capacity to, especially when you're creating stuff, and we got to be blunt and critical, and we don't have time to waste. You know, we just have to get to the point sometimes, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I think it's a tact that I've had to learn, because, you know, the culture in South Africa is very direct. It's like, tell it like it is, no bullshit, no hurt feelings. But I think, you know, being in first the Midwest and now here, you kind of, there's a way to do things. I think that, yes, you got to be truthful, but I think there's also, you know, we in the generation of younger people now, you kind of have to be a little bit more empathetic, I think. It's kind of empathy is a trait that I think we all need to learn a little more of. even when it comes to giving criticism.
Yeah.
And then I think on the other side is like, how do we grow harder skins so that we don't feel like everything's an attack towards us?
Yeah. It's funny. I always, the two pieces of content that I want people to check out when they get here is, I always want people to see read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, because it just shows like what a shit show Nike was at the beginning and how sometimes things look way messy behind a really, really, really well polished, calculated brand. And then the Defiant ones, just story of Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, because I just love watching those guys' journey. And I mean, it's like, I'm telling you, I call it the Godfather of creatives, like the Godfather, where there's all those lessons. Well, it feels like it has all those lessons along the way. Everything from like business, creative, like, even him just being in the studio with Bruce Springsteen and wanting to give up. And this is like Jimmy Iovine, probably one of the most celebrated record producers of all time. And watching him go through all of that. And there's just so many lessons in that series.
I love that documentary. It's so good. It's one of the best documentaries. Shoe Dog, that's a book. That's not a documentary.
It's a book. Yeah. So it's a story, Netflix optioned it a few years back, so they're going to make a movie. But it's just a story of Phil Knight starting Nike, which is incredible.
The story's incredible.
Yeah. And what's nuts is I got to go to Portland, like basically 3 months after finishing the book, like by just random coincidence for a project. And I was like pinching myself. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And we went to Nike and checked it out. And it was just nuts to see, dude. And it's like nuts. Like you almost like all of the advertising stuff that obviously comes out of Portland is like, it's like because Nike's there. Like that's what's so crazy. I'm like, it became a city because of, basically Nike, a brand. It's crazy.
And Magic Johnson, what a lost opportunity, right?
Did you see Winning Time? Dude, like, okay, so I'm so happy. True. I'm so happy that you brought this up because I got to lower my volume here because I'm going to get excited about this one. Like this one gets me worked up. That show did not get nominated for a single Emmy, and I don't understand that, like whatsoever. Like it is like the ultimate betrayal. Good. It's my favorite. Like after episode 1, I turned to my wife and I'm like, this might be my favorite show of all time. After the season ended, I'm like, this is my favorite show of all time. I mean, it's the content I love, the voice that I love. To me, Adam McKay. Adam McKay. I just don't know how he could have Succession winning all these Emmys and then not even get zero acknowledgement for Winning Time. I thought Winning Time was out of this world.
And the season 2 is going to be even better because the story just gets even more interesting as it goes.
For sure. No, and I thought
I went so deep. I went down like a wormhole that series, like the Wikipedia page and the story of what's the manager's name? The guy who changes it all.
No, it's not Paul Westhead. That's the other guy.
Jerry.
Well, Jerry Buss.
Jerry Buss.
Okay.
The story of him is just what an amazing story.
Like the Chrysler Building. Like I still to this day would tell him that's probably one of the worst business decisions that anyone's ever made. I don't care that it worked out for him. I still think it's a terrible business decision in every sense of the word. But I loved. I thought John C. Reilly was absolutely genius. I thought all the performances were out of this world. And I tell people all the time, like, I have the Heat season tickets, and there's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. And part of the tickets is you're able to walk by the court side and then walk up to my seats. And I always feel like we don't have that. We don't have the Heat culture, the Heat experience, like basically modern day basketball without Jerry Buss. Like, I mean, his vision for that was relentless.
Totally, cheerleaders, everything, courtside seats, it's all in.
Yeah, man, it's crazy, man. What a visionary, and I to me that show, and even like it's funny. I always talk to people about the graphics, like the way that they utilize the graphics throughout the cutting. Like it just whether it's text or like they cut to that one shot where they had a camera that snuck into the practice to see how they were running it, and all the footage is like white balanced wrong. Like it's just so much funny shit in there that's incredible.
So good. It's really well considered. It's a genius series, and it's so entertaining. It's such an entertaining series. I loved it. I flew through it. I think I watched it in like less than a week, in like 4 days or something.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. You like basketball?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big Bulls fan. Even as a kid growing up, because of obviously the Jordan era. And then
that you want to talk about it? that doc series was like something else, man. Like I
That
still,
was
it's,
amazing.
it's really funny. So Ramiro and the team always say, they're like, they say I lead with sports references. They're like, you'll learn this about Julian. If you don't know sports, like he always uses sports references. And I have like a bunch of clips ripped from The Last Dance that I always show people from The Last Dance and the Defiant ones. But man, that Last Dance thing, Jordan was, it's just crazy how much of that stuff they shot on 35. Like, it's just like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, and also just what he achieved, that'll never be replicated. I don't think that could ever be replicated again.
No.
That sort of winning mentality and just the type of like winner player he was at the time. I don't think you're ever going to get a player that could just achieve in that way. Like, yes, there might be players that are similar to him.
I mean,
what they achieve will never
Kobe
be the
got
same.
damn close, man. I mean, Kobe
But
was
he never
right
did
there.
two, three peats though. I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah.
That's to do it twice. I mean, that'll never happen again. No way.
I grew up, I was born in 84. So from the age of 6 to 16, it was the 90s when Jordan was on the Bulls. So for me, a 6-year-old to 16, those 10 years, I mean, as a sports fan, I mean, I tell people all the time, you guys don't understand, especially younger generation, like what Sports Illustrated was, what like everything was so calculated, and they had so much control of his brand, and there was nothing like it before. So people didn't even really know how to like spear into it. Like he was bigger. I don't know how to explain it. It was larger than life. Like this guy was literally a god, more than like LeBron or any of these guys now, which I all love. But they're watered down a little bit because of how much we've been thrown in our face for almost 30 years. But Jordan at the time, I don't think there was anything. I felt like before him, it was like Muhammad Ali and Babe Ruth that were like at that level of God.
Totally. Pele.
Yeah, and Pele. Yeah, for sure. No, but it's like crazy for real.
No, he's no, and so it's a big Bulls fan, and then also the Cubs. I was a big fan of as well, because I literally, the year we arrived in Chicago was the year that their 108-year streak was broken. And so we're like, what do you mean the Cubs suck? They're amazing. They're incredible. So being in the city at that time was just like, what an experience to be there with the whole city going crazy, because it's a huge baseball city.
Yeah.
That was amazing as well. A big Cubs and Bulls fan.
Yeah.
And I love the Lakers as well. I mean, the Lakers in their heyday. Yeah, I mean, I don't have allegiance because I'm not from a city here. But I just like the teams in back in the day, that when the Lakers had Shaq and Kobe and that whole kind of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they were just so good.
Watch on Hulu the Showtime Lakers doc. It's actually amazing. It's Jeannie Buss did it, but I don't remember what director. I'm having a brain fart, but he did an incredible job, and it's amazing, man. And it's funny. I when the Marlins won the World Series in '97, I was fortunate enough to be there for Game 7, and I've been to two of the Heat championships. I happened to be at the arena. There's nothing like that clinching championship moment. I mean, like in any sport that you're a fan of, it's the best thing ever, man. It's great.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, Dean, man, I know we're running a little time here, but I do appreciate you taking the time, man. This has been awesome, and I've always been it's funny. We were kind of figuring out who we would do, and you're one of the first names that came up, and I had such a great experience collaborating with you on the Lift project.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. I remember one moment. It was one moment where I was like, I don't know if I should interject here, but I had like this idea for the music, and I chimed in, and then you were just kind of staring at me, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if I should have spoke. And you're like, no, keep going. And I remember I was telling Ramiro, I was like, that moment. Just I got you in that moment, and that was awesome. Like this idea that you're really open to listening, you're really opening to exploring anything, man. And I always thought that was a sign of why you're a successful creative. It's to really, really be able to listen and take things in and be a curator of all of this information and decide what are the kind of the right things.
Love that. Well, I love what you guys are doing. Big fans. I hope we get to work together more.
For sure.
I think you guys have a very unique offering in Miami. What you guys do all and appreciate you inviting me. Just a normal dude who just loves being creative and loves his kids, and it's awesome to sometimes just speak to people and just about like what's happened in my career. So appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this too. It was fun.
Of course, man. Of course, this is great, man. I this is my way of of just letting my curiosity run a little more, man, and just learning about people, which is one of my favorite things to do. So
I hope you got. Well, I hope you got what you need.
Oh, of course.
Not all boring. Cool.
Awesome, Dean. All right, brother. Thank you very much, man. Take care.
Of course. Thanks, man. Ciao, ciao.